All right, welcome, Micaela. I'm so glad you're here.
Excited to be here.
So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Micaela Shaw. I'm SVP of Revenue and Growth Marketing at Time for Learning.
Awesome. We're so happy that you're here. And I was super excited about the work that you do. And so I reached out to you and just wanted to ask you some questions about parenting and managing things like that for founders. So, my first question is, why is it critical for founders to integrate their parenting and their leadership roles instead of trying to separate things and say, I leave work at work, all of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, especially post-pandemic, right, we all realize that that time is fluid and I, trying to separate like the time I go to the office and the time that I'm home is maybe less productive for a lot of people. And so, at least for me, I think that just accepting that there's going to be times where work has to spill into personal life and to the other end, creating enough space and freedom to say, I'm going to block my calendar in the middle of the day and use this for personal time as well has been really important and really liberating. I guess the other trend that I see just increasingly as we work with global teams is that people are in different time zones anyway, right? And so, there's going to be times if you're on the West Coast that you have to take a really early morning call for that East Coast person or that person in London. And so to enable us to do that, I think it's just super important that we not burn the candle at both ends and also, again, take the time for family that we need to be as present as possible in both worlds.
Yes, that makes so much sense. And so when we're thinking about this, I'm sure some people will be thinking, oh, that means I'll have to trade off success in this thing or that thing. What would you say are some of the false but common trade-offs that people feel like they have to let go of just to be successful, whether as parents or whether as founders? But it's not really true, but it's just something that we all think we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, it was really liberating when I realized that both in terms of my scorecard as a parent and my scorecard as an executive, it's not just about the total number of hours that you put in, but the quality of time that you put in with your relationships, right? And so I think clearing space for a really effective one-on-one at work that's 30 minutes long where you really can go deep on topics with an individual as opposed to sitting in six-hour meetings with them where you're talking surface level can be a really big difference. And so making sure that you're spending as much quality time with folks as possible and really auditing your calendar and saying what is the time that I'm finding myself just working at the surface level and not getting deep with people. And I honestly think about it the same way as a mom. Just being there for hours of time, being at every volunteer event is less important to me than really quality story time with my daughter right before bed. And so just picking those moments that are important, and that's going to change obviously as your kids are growing up, where you realize that you're getting that depth of relationship building as opposed to just checking the box of like, yes, I was present.
So good. It's about the quality. Quantity matters, but the quality is more important when you're so focused on so many things. I think that makes so much sense. Um, are there some habits or structures that you would recommend to help founders reduce the amount of context switching? Like, oh, I'm thinking about family stuff right now. Oh, I'm thinking about work stuff. I'm thinking about this. And are there some habits or structures that you found to work for you or people you know that can help to reduce that and the stress, even though sometimes everything feels like it's urgent?
Yeah, I think for me, time boxing is super important. And so, whether it's a meeting or it's a specific time that I'm going to work on something, saying I'm going to take the next 30 minutes, I'm going to take the next 2 hours and just focus on this and, try not to answer my phone, try not to be answering emails, doing anything else. And so I think that helps me just optimize as much as possible without feeling like I'm going crazy between things, right? Also, I'm someone who works from home, and so planning in transition moments to my day has been really important. At the end of the day, maybe I'll take my dog for a walk, and that's kind of my emotional commute to get out of being really fired up from work and be able to be present with my kids. And then at the end of the day, I might sit back down at the computer and, have a glass of wine or whatever as the kids are in bed already. But I'll intentionally plan some work that's more like reading or contemplative work as opposed to, just trying to crush through emails or something. And so just kind of being thoughtful about where do you bring different kinds of energy in your day, and do you have the right transition moments kind of baked into the way that you work?
So good. So for some of these founders with their kids, they start considering homeschooling or alternative schooling, and but there's so much to think about and it can be overwhelming. What are some tips or strategies that you would recommend for people considering homeschooling or alternative schooling to just help them do their research and figure out if it's the best thing for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the aha moment that a lot of our homeschool families tell us is the moment when they realize that homeschooling doesn't mean trying to replicate the school day. And so it's not just like, ta-da, it's 9 o'clock, must start language arts. It's 10 o'clock, must start math. That works for some families, but honestly, a big part of the power of homeschooling is being able to change your schedule every single day based on what's available to your children, what's going on with you personally at work. And so I think that freedom is something that parents really enjoy, and also realizing that they're not trying to replicate the school day. And so there's some families that spend a ton of time outside in the morning, or want to go and visit museums, and then in the afternoon is more the deep work study time. Just kind of playing around with scheduling is something that's really important. The other thing that that a lot of homeschool families realize very quickly is that the 9 to 3 schedule that's in the classroom is not the time that's required to get through the academics, especially in the lower grades. And so our elementary school students can get through their entire academic day in about 2 hours, maybe even less for the lower grades. And so then you freed up the rest of the day, right, in terms of ways that they can be spending their time. And so that becomes really interesting, kind of going up to our older grades. We have high schoolers who are working with their parents or working independently to build businesses alongside with school because they just have more time. And so, I think really it appeals to a lot of entrepreneurs because it's about building a culture of entrepreneurship and the philosophy around flexibility of time, that transcends the school schedule and the work schedule, if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense. And I know people might be listening to this and like, that seems so awesome. It seems amazing. It makes sense, but they might still be nervous that like, well, would my kids miss this? Or I know a lot of people talk about socialization. Would my kid miss this and that? What are some things that you can respond to that or help them to go research so that they can come to their own decision themselves?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be different for every family and every kid in the same way that, some adults love working from home and some adults love working in the office, right? I think that for all of us humans, it's important to be intentional about building relationships and building community. And so many of our homeschool families do participate in co-ops that kind of become that support system in lieu of the school, or they're just super involved in extracurriculars. Obviously, a lot of these kiddos get really involved in club sports, for example, or like I said, are entrepreneurs in their own right. And so they build communities there and maybe really involved in their church. And so they tend to be really engaged in communities outside of school. And because they have flexibility of time, they can kind of plan that engagement, again, more flexibly than they otherwise would. I guess the other piece that I think a lot of homeschool families take advantage of is the ability to travel as a family outside of regular school breaks and things. And so that allows families a much more international perspective. And again, it just allows more like fluidity in terms of cultural experiences, and relationships that kids can build outside of a group of 8-year-olds that are all exactly at the same level, right? You wind up with kids who can interact with adults and kiddos at all different ages and spectrums because that's their world.
And that is so important because I find that a lot of young people, they don't know how to interact with people that are of a different age group
Yeah.
because they're
I
so
think it's a
used.
skill set even some adults don't have, right? Like, how do I talk to someone 20 years older than me or 20 years younger than me? And as we know, that's super important as an executive. So it's cool.
Yeah, it's such a good skill to have. I see that all the time. So for people who are building a team, they're building this business, they're founders, they want to create a culture where everyone feels welcome. Do you have some thoughts around how they can support caregivers and parents and stuff like that and create a community where their team members feel supported?
Yeah, I guess a few thoughts on this. I mean, obviously, when a new team member just starts, you can't exactly say like, "Hey, what's your life schedule? What's everything going on?" So you don't want to pry, but I do like to I do this thing called a 90-day alignment session with all my team members when they start, and it's about a 3 to 4 hour conversation where we talk about communication, their life story, their like where they get their most energy at work. And so we tend to get to some things like family in those conversations, right? Then we talk about their job description and how they're experiencing their job description, and then we talk about their career goals. And so I think those 3 pillars are nice because it helps us think about career success through the lens of like what the business needs, but also like what they want in their career based upon where they are at in life. And so that helps us begin to have really transparent conversations around how I can best position them for success in their role in the future, but also make accommodations that make sense. Just some examples of some things that have come out of those conversations. I've had team members who have said, "Hey, something that's really important to me is my ability to, take my kid to ballet in the afternoon, and that's something that I really want to prioritize." And so, in a lot of cases, it's been like, "Okay, great, we can try to not schedule team meetings at that specific time block every Thursday." And instead have it in the morning, but you don't know that until you have those conversations, and obviously the bigger a team gets, the more that that these conversations need to change in terms of the way that you handle them. But yeah, I think it's honestly just like getting to know people and creating a safe space. I guess the last thought I would add on this topic is, as a leader, I try to show vulnerability around the crazy that is my own family, right? If my kids are sick and I have to, pick them up, or if there's something going on, I will say that at work somewhat intentionally because I want it to feel like a space where we can talk about our real lives and not feel like there needs to be a work Micaela and a home Micaela, if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense. So, if a founder is still growing in their skills and trying to figure things out, how can they tell if their current pace is unsustainable? And what are some things that can help them to create a more sustainable, I say, life and pace with what they're doing?
Yeah, I don't know about you. I certainly, find that my energy is going to change a lot. Just depends on what's going on in the business. And so I think probably the most important thing about being in a growth stage business and raising a family is realizing that the season of life that you're in is not going to be the same like around you at every moment. And so I think that's a long way of saying, at one point, I think I've tried to optimize, like, how do I come up with the perfect formula and the perfect schedule for me? Well, I'm never going to find that because we might be about to launch a product at work. And so, it's a completely different like world around me that I'm dealing with. So first of all, accepting that of you're going to have really intense seasons based upon what's going on in the business. And it doesn't mean that like you failed at work-life balance. It means that you're in a really crazy period and you're going to get through it. But with that said, I think also just noticing your energy and noticing like where your energy is contributing to you being more productive versus where it's really draining you. And so, for example, I was saying I sometimes like to sign on back onto work after the kids go to bed. I can do that probably like 2 days a week and feel pretty great. Like, okay, I'm on top of my stuff. But if I do that every single weeknight, I just start to feel really depleted. I wake up the next morning and I'm like, oh gosh, this again. Because I haven't had any me time and time to talk to my husband. Like I don't feel good. So I think acknowledging that and saying, hey, these are my boundaries has been helpful. And, there's always going to be days you have to trespass those boundaries, but also, understanding where those lie becomes really important. And then the last that I'd add is, for me, making sure I'm getting enough exercise, enough time outside is super important. It sounds obvious, basic health tip, but I really notice it if I ignore those things and just, don't pay attention to my health.
Mm, those are all so good. I love the idea of just accepting that it's going to be tricky, give yourself that grace. And then there will be times when you do trespass those boundaries, and it's okay too, but try not to do it too often. So I really like how you framed that. So in situations where you have priorities for your family, and you also have priorities for your business or for the company you're working in, do you have any tools that help you to make decisions or to strategize or to figure out what to do next?
Question. Well, I probably have a stronger bias towards quick decision making. And so I tend to have thresholds. Like, if any decision at work that's less than a $2,000 decision, we shouldn't spend, more than one meeting on, is one basic rule of life, right? Sometimes I feel like there's a lot of hand wringing over very small decisions in terms of investment or people's time that we should just make and move on, and we can look back and see if it was a good idea or a bad idea, but it's not going to change the trajectory. And I think similarly, I try not to be a big worrywart when it comes to my kids or my life in general. And so I think, making decisions, allowing some degree of risk and accepting that it's always going to exist, but trying to make sure that you focus on creating strategy and frameworks around the really big problems, and not try to create some sort of a framework for every single problem, if that makes sense. So I actually find where I have wound up going the wrong way the most is trying to apply like some really complicated decision-making framework to every problem that I address. That's unwieldy after a while, right? And so, yes, should you come up with a methodical way of making decisions? 100%. And try to apply that only to like 4 to 5 big problems a month. And the rest, just make the decision really quickly and then see what happens.
Right. I like that. And that's interesting because there are some people who make decisions more quickly, and there's some people who want to really think about every single thing. So that's a different conversation. Um, so for people who are listening or watching right now, if you could give them like one thing that they can do today to make a difference in their family life and in their work life, where would you tell them to start so they can show up better at work and show up better at home?
Um, well, so I have 3 kids. I have a 3-year-old, an 8-year-old, and an 11-year-old. And one thing in particular that my 11-year-old has taught me is, I think when I first had a baby, I was kind of like trying to read all the books and learn like, okay, what are the decisions that I can make that will set him up for success, forevermore. And every time I make one of these big decisions, where should he go to school? Where should we live? What do I want my work schedule to be? Some change has flown at me, whether it's him not, fitting the situation that I've put him in, or my life changing. And so I've kind of given up trying to figure out how to make the perfect decision that's just gonna like be set. Like, okay, great, I'm a good parent, my kid's set, and they're going to Harvard or something. And just realize that like every year they're going to change as a human, and your life around you is going to change. And so you're going to need to like revisit these things that you thought were settled. And again, making peace with that has been really important to me, and I think to success. I think it's also like raising our kids with that philosophy increasingly has made them more flexible as humans, and that I think makes us more poised for opportunity. And so as changes and opportunities come across, with especially if you work in growth stage businesses, you never know what the next big opportunity is going to be. And sometimes I think living in that world with a family can seem very restrictive in terms of like, oh wow, but I want to keep everything set for my family. So kind of give up that idea that things are going to be set and that you won't have to change, and almost lean into the change across your whole life. And I think you'll be happier and more poised to grow.
So good. So good. I think that was such a good way to wrap everything up. So someone listening to this is like, I really need to connect with you. I need to learn about homeschooling. I need to learn about your philosophies. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah. Yeah, happy to have them reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. Yeah, that's probably the best place to follow me.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Micaela. It's been such a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you.